having your car stolen and then going out and seeing it drive around. Now, you can't leave me hanging here. So what did you do after that? Like, how did you end up finding it? Did you end up confronting the guy? What happened with it?
So he's out there joyriding, of course, and I'm in my nightmares imagining him treating this car, chopping this car up, putting regular unleaded gas in it, all the sins that you do.
Right.
And I see the car, and I want nothing more than to jump the curb and go immediately speed after it and run every red light and slice through traffic. But I'm in a Lexus GX 470. I could maybe jump the curb, but I'm not slicing through traffic very much. Mm-hmm. And he was already had a head start. So almost as quick as I saw him, I lost him. And it was devastating. It was almost more difficult than if I never saw it at all, right?
Wow.
Because it was right there at my fingertips, and then he got away.
He's the nut behind the wheel and behind the mic. This is Automotive ADHD with Matt West.
Colorado this holiday season. 11 News' Grace Kramer brings us this story.
It hasn't been wrecked, and it hasn't been stripped for parts. And I honestly feel like I'm the luckiest guy in the whole city.
Thomas Bristol was not feeling like the luckiest guy earlier this week when he learned that his rare and very unique 1993 Nissan Skyline GTR was stolen from his home in Denver.
And that story, by the way, has a happy ending. And in just a second here, I'm going to talk to the owner of that very car about what happened. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about these car theft stats. And by the way, if you listen to this show, if you've listened to it for any length of time, you know that I talk about car theft pretty often, actually. And I was even a victim of car theft about 2 years ago when my cherished 1977 AMC Hornet was stolen in the night. And my next guest, by the way, his car's probably a little nicer than that crusty old Hornet. But Colorado is the mecca of car theft. And you would never think of that. You would think, oh, it's got to be New York or, oh, maybe California, whatever. You're thinking it's another place, but it's not. It is Colorado, according to the most recent FBI crime data. And that's let's see, we have 51.43. You can't have a whole vehicle there, but roughly on average, 51 vehicles stolen per 100,000 citizens. And Colorado, we're right there. We're right there at the top of that. We are. Even when you look at a map of where car theft is in this country, you see Colorado as the hot spot. And I'll roll some of that here if you're watching on the video version of this show. Of course, you can catch this on the radio, AM 1460 The Answer, as well as AM 1400 KRLN and 91.7 KLZR. But you can also find it online, YouTube, Spotify, wherever fine shows in this one are downloaded, and you'll see that in the video. So I do want to talk to my next guest here, though. His name is Tommy Bristol. He's the owner of an R32 Skyline GTR. Tommy, welcome to Automotive ADHD.
Hey there. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and so, okay, we heard at the top of the segment a little bit about what happened. We have a little bit of context right now, but before we talk about your car, before we talk about it getting stolen, give me just a little bit of your background. Introduce yourself to the listeners.
Yeah, hi. I've lived in Colorado my whole life. I live in Denver. I'm 40 years old, and I've always been into cars my whole life, but a little while ago I got a raise at a job and I was able to kind of buy a car I wanted, and I bought the first car I ever wanted that I had ever dreamed of, and it was actually a Honda S2000, and that kind of started me scratching an itch of buying cars that I've always kind of wanted, and kind of pushing my paycheck to the limits when I could and when I could pay off cars and all of that. So I've always been into cars, and I bought the S2000 as my first, dream car. And then at some point in 2017, I decided, hey, what is it like to import a car? What is it like to get something really rare, really unique? What would that take? And I saw that R34s were legal and, relatively affordable at the time. So I decided to import one there. So I've always been into cars, and sometimes I've had too many, and recently I had one fewer against my will. So.
Oh, man. Well, I can, as a one S2000 owner to another as well, I can attest to the financially irresponsible decisions that we we partake in at times. And that's part of why this show's called Automotive ADHD, by the way. So I think you'll fit in around here. I think you'll fit in.
Yeah, definitely.
So, Tommy, tell me a little bit, about the car itself. What was that process like, importing it? What modifications did you do to the car? And maybe why do you think it caught the eye of the thieves?
Yeah, so back in 2017, it was just kind of on a whim, I had just paid off a car, and I kind of had a little bit of a car payment room in my budget, and I was like, what can I do something really unique with this money in my budget? A normal person would probably save it or, buy something practical, but I wanted to buy another car, and I looked. And I found that you can import these cars. I found a website that has they showed the stock from used cars in Japan, and they had a special section for cars that were legal to import to the U.S. I clicked on it, and I saw some Skylines in there, and I was like, I can maybe afford one of these. At the time, it was running around $20,000. So that was, it's not like a small amount of money, but broken into some payments, I was like, I could probably afford that. And I kind of started on this journey, and it took probably a solid 6 months of just logistics and paperwork and calling companies and all of these other things just to try to get that on a boat and then off a boat in California. And then I flew out to California, picked up the car, and drove it back with a lot of adventures along the way, lots of issues and discovering what it's like to own a 25-year-old Japanese rare car in the U.S. And it's been an adventure ever since. This is only an additional part of that story.
Yeah, and you are absolutely a brave man, by the way, for importing a car like that and then driving it back to Colorado. Just saying, that's a lot of faith in how that car arrived there at the shipyards. I've bought a car sight unseen at an auction, at least here in the U.S., and I'll tell you, you think, all right, yeah, the pictures are good, but you never really know what you're getting into, right?
Yeah, you really do discover a lot about the car on the way. I got extremely lucky. There were only a few issues. Of course, at the time, they felt like big disasters, and I didn't know what to expect. But, yeah, as far as the car itself, so it's a 1993. It's actually close to the end of the model run of the R34s, of the R32s. So it's got a lot of little improvements. There's not the same oil pump issues that a lot of the R32s have. I didn't really do any major modifications. I replaced all of the suspension, wheels, and tires. That's the major piece I did when I got it. It already had boost restrictor removed, an aftermarket exhaust, and by aftermarket, it was actually a Nismo exhaust. And that's about it, right? I decided to get an auction inspection report done. In Japan, they do very meticulous auction inspections. And it turns out that it had one door panel replaced in its life. So that means it was a poor grade in Japan because any body panel repair is, a repaired vehicle. But it's also had an R34 engine block swapped into it.
Really?
It's using all the R32 internals and R32 turbo, but the block itself is an R34 block, so that's very interesting.
That is, and I suppose it's RB26 and another RB26, but just a later one, right?
Yeah, exactly. But all the other components, like the head and the turbos, they're all normal R32 stuff. And it came to me with probably around 67,000 miles on it. 1993 with 67,000 miles on the chassis, and probably around 67,000 on the engine, maybe a little more or less, because in Japan, once you hit around that 100,000 kilometer mark, taxes go up pretty steeply, and people usually just either get rid of the car or swap in a new engine. So,
yep, I can attest to that. Anytime you import a car or even an engine itself, I've imported engines at least, and you usually find 100,000 kilometers. That's always a number that keeps coming up there. So, but I think, Tommy, and I think, what's interesting about this, and we will carry this on here into the next segment, but what I think is interesting is, you go through the effort, you go through the dedication to import a rare, unusual, interesting car from Japan, all of the hoops to go through to make that happen, only for some guy in the night to just think he's more entitled to it than you.
Yeah, it feels like quite a violation, actually. It's something that I don't think compares to any other crime that is nonviolent, right? Those types of burglaries and taking something so precious from you, it really is as close to being assaulted as I think you can get without actually having violence committed against you personally.
Yeah.
And the whole time it was gone, I was having all of these just thoughts and fears of what could be happening to my car. I felt like Pee Wee Herman.
Yeah.
Looking for his bicycle, you know what I mean?
Yeah, Tommy, hold that thought for just a second. Let's carry this on after the break. You're listening to Automotive ADHD.
Colorado Springs' #1 car show by default. This is Automotive ADHD.
And if you listen to this show, that you can send your car sounds in for a chance to have them featured right here on the air. And you also have a chance to win some free stuff when you do that. The Automotive ADHD key tag, as well as the Automotive ADHD as heard on the Automotive ADHD sticker, and a parts store gift certificate. All of that could be yours. Remember to send those car sounds into the show, facebook.com/Automotive ADHD. Those car sounds, by the way, were sent by Tom. That was a Cadillac Escalade with a 6.2-liter supercharged V8. So again, facebook.com/Automotive ADHD. While you're there, like the page as well. Now, if you were joining us before the break, I've got Tommy Bristol on the line. He is the owner of a R32 Nissan Skyline GTR, and his Skyline made some headlines here for getting stolen, but then also getting recovered in a way that I think it was probably the fact that it was recovered at all is spectacular. But through social media, Tommy, you were able to have that car at least returned to you, or you're waiting for it to get it back right now, but we'll get into that, right?
Yeah. It's actually something I never expected to happen, and something that almost didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the morning it was stolen. It was stolen at like 3 a.m, and my neighbors came to me around 4 and said, "Hey, Tommy, we heard this huge crash. A man drove another car through the garage door of the building, smashed the garage door off the building completely, just to steal your car, and it's gone." And I was devastated and like heartbroken. And toward little later in the day, once the sun started coming up, a friend of mine who I told about it said, "Hey, you need to announce this. You need to post this. There are Colorado stolen car groups on Facebook. There are car spotter groups. There's cars and coffee groups. Everyone knows, right? You need to at least let people know the car. The car's important. Let them know. Maybe that some of them can see it." And I said, "No, I don't use Facebook. I don't really want to." She said, "Send me the pictures. Send me the story. I'll do it." So she posted for me on the Colorado Cars and Coffee and a couple others groups. And that started to get attention almost immediately. Almost immediately, people were posting pictures of my car. They had seen a Skyline driving south on I-25. They pulled out their phones to take a picture of the Skyline. People don't see those very often. And then they maybe got home or got to work and saw the post on the Facebook group and said, "Hey, I just saw that car and I took pictures. And it's going south, going this way. I saw it passing Castle Rock. I saw it at the Briargate exit. I saw it here, So and almost immediately, the internet was on top of locating my car.
Wow.
Within hours.
And so you were almost getting like real-time updates from people on the pages, the car spotters pages, the cars and coffee pages, right?
Yeah, almost immediately. And very regularly, people were posting, like, "Oh, I saw that Skyline." And there were a lot of pictures and videos. To this day, if you look at those posts on those groups, you can scroll through and see people taking live video of the car. They drove past it. They recorded a Skyline. Early on, people were just taking pictures of a Skyline they thought was cool, and then they realized it had been stolen.
Mm-hmm.
But then later on, we had people actively searching the city, driving around looking for the car. It had been reported in a few places regularly, right? Like a few times in the same places. So at one point, I was kind of fed up with the lack of movement, and I didn't feel like the police were able to kind of take action the way I wanted to. So I drove down to the Springs myself. I live in Denver, and I said, I don't care. I'm going to go drive down there. I'm going to go to these like 4 places that it's been reported multiple times. And I drove myself down there. I didn't know the city, so I had to kind of learn as I go. But at one point, I even saw my own car driving north on Powers Boulevard, I think. And I was like, there's no way I just saw my car. And I tried to make a U-turn. I tried to follow him, but traffic is terrible down there. I think you guys know. And
Yep.
I wasn't able to turn around, and I lost it. But I even saw the car myself. So,
Wow.
no, what do I do? How do I do this? So, yeah, it's been crazy, and the internet totally helped out with that.
That is incredible. And to think that having your car stolen and then going out and seeing it drive around. Now, you can't leave me hanging here. So what did you do after that? Like, how did you end up finding it? Did you end up confronting the guy? What happened with it?
So he's out there joyriding, of course, and I'm in my nightmares imagining him treating this car, chopping this car up, putting regular unleaded gas in it, all the sins that you would.
Right.
And I see the car, and I want nothing more than to jump the curb and go immediately speed after it and run every red light and slice through traffic. But I'm in a Lexus GX 470. I could maybe jump the curb, but I'm not slicing through traffic very much.
Mm-hmm.
And he was already had a head start. So almost as quick as I saw him, I lost him. And it was devastating. It was almost more difficult than if I never saw it at all, right?
Wow.
Because it was right there at my fingertips, and then he got away. So I drove on for a little while more. I was kind of defeated, and I left. I came home, got a bunch more tips on the Facebook groups, by the way. And I'm convinced that the Facebook groups and all of the attention online, word got to him eventually. And he started to see that there were photos of him driving my car. Like every 30 minutes, his location was being tracked, and he got sick of it or got afraid, and he decided to drive out of the city a little bit, drop the car off, and leave it. Because that night at 11:30, I got a call from the El Paso County Sheriff telling me they found the car in the Black Forest area, and it's being recovered.
Wow. I mean, I'm almost speechless. And so the fact is that social media contributed to him getting so much attention that he didn't want to have any part of it. That's your theory.
That's my theory,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because otherwise, I mean, he didn't strip the car. He didn't wreck the car. He joyrided around a little bit in it and then left it on the side of the road.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Now, what's interesting to me, too, is looking back to when it got stolen. I mean, it got stolen basically out of a secured kind of parking complex where you're at, right?
Oh, yeah. It's a secure building. It's not like it's the safest area in the world, but it's in an underground parking garage, the locked garage door,
Mm-hmm.
and cameras watching the door and everything. He had to drive another stolen car through the garage door to punch the garage door open to get in to see it.
Yeah.
So at some point through scouting or otherwise, he knew there was a Skyline in that garage, and he wanted it so bad that he would literally dump another car and, commit all of this drama to it. I wish I had the security footage for the news when they aired the story, but it's pretty dramatic.
Yeah. And I mean, it just makes me wonder, like when someone does that, when they scouted it out, maybe they saw the car on a Car Spotters page too. I don't know, but it makes it you were definitely, in that sense, targeted in that way. It wasn't just like, hey, I'm going to bust through this garage and see what I find. I mean, he knew it was in there.
No, for sure. There were reports of some of my neighbors scaring off people who were kind of snooping around the garage a few weeks ago. I was out of town,
Mm-hmm.
and there were reports of them snooping around the garage and being very suspicious and running away when they saw one of the residents. So
Wow.
I'm almost positive that was for my car. They were scouting and trying to find a way in, and they couldn't, so they just drove a car through the building.
Wow. Tommy Bristol is my guest. His Skyline was stolen, then recovered. Tommy, we've only got about 30 seconds left, but really quick, what's next now? What's on the horizon? When are you getting the car back? Have you had a chance to see it? What are the next steps looking like?
So, yeah, right now it's being held for evidence at an evidence lot. I need to wait for them to call me and let me know when they get, fingerprints and things like that out of the car.
Mm-hmm.
Then I'll be able to go down and see how drivable it is. They said it's not wrecked and it looks okay, so I'm hoping I can drive it out of there. If not, I'll have it towed. And I just want to say thank you to everybody online that commented on the post and, gave some information and helped out. From beginning to end, it was about 44 hours.
Wow.
My car was stolen, and they recovered it 44 hours later. I'm nothing but grateful.
That is an incredible story. Tommy, thank you so much for joining me right here on the Automotive ADHD show. I am glad your car is at least on its way back. Let's remember to keep an eye on things. Watch out. Car thieves, man, there are so many of them out there. We got to be on the lookout. You're listening to Automotive ADHD.